morning, and thank you for joining us for our very first Thinking About talk of the series in this autumn term. I'm Sue Mulholland. I'm a teacher at Dulwich College and part of this SSLP, the Southwark Schools Learning Partnership. I will be handing over in just one moment to Dr. Joe Spence, who is co-director of the SSLP and the Master of Dulwich College. Joe, unfortunately, cannot join us live tonight. He is at a Heads conference in South Wales, but he has pre-recorded a message for us about the series, about Thinking About, and also introducing our guest speaker for this evening, Professor Stephen Scott. I'd also just like to take a moment to introduce our panel of students from St Saviour's and St Olave's and Dulwich College. Hello to Angel, Zoe and Zain, and we should also have Amjad joining us later on, and they will be asking questions on the behalf of the audience and also pre-designed questions for Professor Scott. If you have further questions you would like to ask during the talk, can you please pop those into the Q&A and we'll make sure that one of the panel can ask those. So I'll hand over now to, as I say, recording from Dr. Joe Spence and introducing Stephen. And on all our behalf, Stephen, thank you so much for launching the series on such an important issue that all our students across our partnership of schools have voted for what our focus should be this year, and it being on mental health, teenage mental health, which is such a huge issue and so important that we discuss with transparency. So over to Dr. Spence.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first Thinking About talk of the academic year 2021-22. We had a fantastic series of lectures last year under lockdown, and I'm delighted that there's an appetite to continue this series of virtual talks through 2021-22. We know that although we hope that through this coming year we'll have plenty of chance to do things in person, this twilight slot, this after-school slot of these 5 p.m. talks, we believe will still suit a virtual format. We know that it's quite something to be making your way across Southwark from Bermondsey to Dulwich or Dulwich to Bermondsey or beyond with our associate schools. And therefore it's a chance to gather as many people as possible together in the virtual realm to listen to talks that might be academic or vocational or related to causes. I'm Dr. Joe Spence. I'm one of the co-directors of the Southwark Schools Learning Partnership, along with Catherine May, the head of St Saviour and St Olave's. I'm the master of Dulwich College, and I'm very proud to be launching the series of Thinking About talks today. I'm very sorry I can't be with you. I'm at a conference of headmasters and headmistresses in South Wales, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to welcome you and indeed to welcome our first guest of the year, Professor Stephen Scott. I've had the pleasure of working with Professor Scott as a trustee of a charity called Place to Be, which makes great interventions into the lives of young people and helps them with their mental health and well-being, notably within a school setting. And nobody could be better qualified than Professor Scott to lead our conversation this evening. Stephen Scott is Professor of Child Health and Behaviour at the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience at King's College London. But beyond that, he's also the Director of the National Academy for Parenting Research, a consultant child and adolescent psychiatrist at the Maudsley Hospital, and chair of the Association for Child and Adolescent Mental Health. So I know from having heard Professor Scott speaking eloquently, passionately, sensitively about mental health issues, just how much he will give to you this evening. And he didn't hesitate when the invitation was made to him. I think you'll find him someone who will really want to talk to you, to give you of his wisdom of experience, but also to listen to your concerns and to offer you some support directly. You may, if you've been with us before, know the format. We'll invite Professor Scott to make a short address to start the session, and then our pupil interviewers will lead the Q&A, both taking pre-submitted questions that they and you may have prepared, and then taking questions that are asked on the evening. And of course, nothing could be more appropriate than that we are starting our Thinking About season with thinking about adolescent mental health, because you, the pupils of all of our Southwark schools, the 13 state schools and 4 independent schools that make up our partnership, have chosen mental health as your theme for the year, building on the tremendous work on anti-racism that you undertook in the last academic year, 2020-2021. So without further ado, let me wish you all the best for tonight and for joining in all of the talks that will follow, and welcome Professor Scott. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Can you hear me? Great. Thank you very much. I feel I should go home now after what Dr. Spence said. But welcome. Thank you for attending this evening. And it is a really interesting and topical subject, isn't it? Mental health, particularly during lockdown. So I think without more ado, there are going to be some questions put to me. Is that right?
Hello, Professor Stephen Scott. So first question, what do mental health professionals consider is a serious problem, and what are they looking for?
Okay, that is a good question. So there are various things we look for. First of all, how long has it been going on? If you're unhappy for 2 or 3 weeks or something like that, it might get better. Lots of things do get better, particularly low mood and depression goes up and down and waves up and down. But once it's been going on 3 to 6 months, well, then you're getting more concerned. Then what symptoms you've got, and we'll come on to what the common problems are. Do you fit into a pattern of symptoms that we can recognize? But then the third thing is, does it actually cause you either distress or get in the way with everyday living? Then it's more serious. So you might meet criteria for screaming out of the room whenever you see a spider and spider phobia. But if that lets you get on with going to school, seeing your friends, doing your sport, that's not impairing you much. Another thing we look at is whether it is across context. Is it happening both at school and at home and when you're out with your mates? In that case, it's more serious. I see kids who are fine at school, and when they get home, they become little princes, snotty, argumentative, refusing to go to bed, really troublesome. But if they're okay at school, that tells you a bit of something that it may or may not be very serious, but it means you should be looking at what's going on at home. So that's what people tend to look at. It's been particularly interesting during COVID. When interesting, we hear a lot more about the overall level being stressed, and it's been horrible. I think we all realize how much we need other people during COVID and lockdown, but actually the average whole population of adolescents has stayed the same, in their ratings of well-being has stayed that. However, those who tend to be anxious or get stroppy, the level has gone up with them. Those who are vulnerable, it's doubled the rate. But do you know what? There have been some kids who are delighted to stay at home and not to have to go to school or things like that if they're anxious. The problem's been when they have to go back. So it's a mixed picture. But so that's what we tend to look for.
Okay, and the second question is, How common are issues from anxiety and depression to eating disorders and drug and alcohol misuse?
Okay, well, in the trade, we divide things into three main different groups. One is the so-called emotional problems or disorders if they're severe, anxiety and depression, which are often first cousins. They often go with each other. If you're depressed, you may be anxious, and if you're anxious, you may be depressed. And with that, things like obsessive compulsive disorder and some eating disorders, which is, everybody's heard of anorexia, but also there's the bulimia, who can be normal weight, but after they've eaten will put their fingers down their throat and throw up. So that's emotional problems. Then the second group is the so-called neurodevelopmental disorders like autism, where the brain is perhaps not zipped up right. That's about 1%. By the way, anxiety and depression, 4 or 5%. I mean, with serious, good going stuff. 1% of people are autistic. These slightly, somebody rudely said, these are the neeks and the nerds who are good at computer science. They're not so good at turn-taking conversations. They'd be very concrete. They might have some rather obsessive rigidities, but they can do well too. And about 2 or 3% have learning disabilities. That means generalized learning disability, low IQ, need a lot of support, Down syndrome, and so on. And of course, the specific learning disabilities like dyslexia. So that's the second group. The third group are the so-called disruptive disorders, and that's two things, ADHD and what we call conduct disorders or behavioral problems. I'm particularly interested in both these groups. ADHD is where you can't sustain concentration and distractible. Is one bit. The second bit is you're very impulsive, you can't wait your turn, you blurt things out, you talk across people all the time. And thirdly, you might be hopping around and a bit restless as a kid, always going up the climbing frame and rushing off. Can't sit down at the meal, have to go off and have a pee or get that salt and pepper or the water. The emotional problems are commoner in girls. In adolescents, about twice as common actually, whereas the behavioral problems are about twice as common in boys. So it kind of levels up. So I think, if I may, I'd like to talk a bit about these things because that illustrates some of the science. I might show you some slides. I might try and share my screen. Bam. Can you see that screen, Katie? Yeah, great. So this is a graph showing that between primary school age, left-hand bar, secondary school age, right-hand bar. This is boys, about 7% have got disruptive behavior. That means being rude, telling people to F off, shouting, refusing to do things. And as they get older, hanging out in a gang, nicking stuff, doing a lot of drugs, dropping out of school, truanting. And you can see it's about half as common in girls for these things. So all disorders are much commoner in the disadvantaged. So this graph, the red, the blue bar at the left is the poorest fifth of the population, having about 16% of, in them 16% have got a disorder of children, young people, whereas in the top richest fifth, only about 4% are. That's a huge difference, isn't it? That's a huge difference. It isn't just about money, it's also they may have more genetic difficulties, but it's still, I find it shocking every time. So this is the antisocial behaviour, which is something that interests me. It's so-called conduct disorder. How we need the boy to be the one above rather than the one down below. Great football fan. And what's the chances they'll grow up to be a happy, well-adjusted boy, hug a hoodie, or will they be somebody beating the joint up? There's quite a lot of science about this, quite a lot is known. This always surprises me a bit. So if we go to primary school, all right, we go to one of the Southwark primary schools, if we take the most naughty 1 or 2 kids in the class, the top 5%, what's the chances they'll turn out to be somebody you really wouldn't be very proud of, or you wouldn't want your child as a young adult to shack up with? Is that, oh, hello, mum and dad, here's my new boyfriend, or whatever. compared with the better half of the class. So look at these huge differences. Those who become violent offenders, 35% versus 3%, heavy drug use, 20% versus 5%, teenage pregnancy, 20% versus 4%, no exams at all. We're talking about an NVQ, yet alone GCSE, 52% versus 6%, and on benefits, this is in their mid-20s, 33% versus 9%. So actually, kids who are being very naughty, telling the teachers where to get off and all that sort of thing are quite important. What causes this as an example? Well, within the child, their makeup, if they're very irritable, if they have what I call callous unemotional traits, which I'll come back to, low IQ, having ADHD, having autistic traits, and something developmental psychologists call something called deviation anxiety. These people who feel a bit uncomfortable when they're being naughty or doing wrong. I don't have particularly high that. My wife, if I go at 32 miles an hour, says, oh, careful, we're going at 32 miles an hour. This could be with no speed cameras, but she doesn't like me deviating. But these kids who are naughty often have low deviation. They don't give a so-and-so, are monkeys. And parenting is very important for everything, but particularly this. Harsh and inconsistent parenting, not having warm, nice times together and encouraging your child, and also not very good at setting limits. One day you can stay up late or come in late smelling a drink. The next day you get a big telling off and shouting at. You need to have consistency about the rules and give them consequences. Okay, sorry you've come in late. I'm taking away your mobile phone for half an hour or for tomorrow. So here's my most difficult slide. This is showing you, which again shocked me. I didn't believe it when I was your age, that genes could make such a difference to behavior. This is age 17, what proportion of kids are in trouble with the police. This is an adoption study where so-called good genes were if your parents were not alcoholic or criminal, and bad genes are if they were. And then they looked at the families they were adopted in, which was whether they were alcoholic and criminal or not. Now, you might think a good social worker should not be giving babies away to alcoholic and criminal parents, but there were enough done in this study that they did. So if you have quotes good genes and quotes a good environment, as measured as that, 3% were in trouble with the police. If you had good genes, in other words, your parents weren't alcoholic criminal, and you were still brought up in an alcoholic or criminal family, it went up to 7%. But then I was a bit surprised to find the third bar on the right, the green one, that if they had difficult genetic parents and were brought up in a favorable environment, they still had 12%. So that was quite important. The genes are quite important. But really what I want to draw your attention to is that last blue bar, that if you have the misfortune to have a difficult genetic hand dealt to you and you live in a harsh environment, bang, 40% in trouble with the police. And you get a similar sort of picture in depression. So genes matter. We don't have specific genetic tests yet, but you can ask people about their family history. Now, within antisocial kids, I want to tell you about one subgroup. There's the ordinary ones who are just a bit stroppy but biologically normal. Their heritability is only 30% from their genes, if you like, but this is one called callous unemotional traits, these rather cold-blooded kids, so-called proto-psychopaths. They do understand social situation, but they don't care. They can be very charming. They make great salesmen when they grow up. Biologically, when you show them frightening things and go, ah, something like that, you and I, our pulses will go up. They stay cool as a cucumber. They make very good special services people, by the way, if you want them to storm into a house where there are people with guns firing at you. They're not fazed by that. They do badly in life, and they can be rather ruthless. So this is a very interesting group that we're particularly interested in at the minute. Here is a study of their brain. There's an area called the amygdala, which is where you sort of feel emotions. And this is a study by a colleague of mine at University College. The normal brain is at the top, the amygdala, this bit of the brain, and the bottom one. Can you see how blue that is? There's just much less blood. It's just not functioning so well. So we're getting much more interested in the brain and the biology, as well as the genetics these days in the study of mental health problems. So what causes good behavior. One of the things is poor parenting, which is an important thing. We've all got them. It can lead you to, you can be taught bad habits, fewer social skills, and you can go off on one more easily and not have good learning habits. Attachment is a big thing. Attachment is when the chips are down, particularly as an infant, can you go, oh, I'm crying, I'm upset, I'm frightened. You go and have a lovely cuddle and everything gets better. And that's important in adolescence, actually, a talking relationship where you can share your problems with your parents. Habits are your parents smoking over you, giving you junk food, not encouraging you to exercise. And actually, we now know that parenting affects your body directly and your brain, including your stress hormones and whether you tend to get inflammation and more illnesses. So quite important the way you're brought up. A buzzword is with children, you go goo goo gaga, and babies, and you're sensitively involved. As an older kid, you talk to them and listen to them, and that affects attachment, attainment, and how well adjusted you are. And it affects your stress hormones, as I suggested. And we now know it affects the way your genes are expressed too, and your brain development. So sensitive responding is an important construct of producing mentally healthy young people. So this slide is one I did in Southwark and Lambeth, a study of 50 children taken into care, looked after children versus 50 kids in a local secondary school. I was asking myself, well, is it all over at 2 then? Because some people say, oh, if you've had a bad start, you're done for, if you haven't got this secure relationship. So these kids have often had difficult genes and been abused, so they're taken into care. I found out how much they were attached to their birth parents, their birth father, 0%, birth mother, 10%, or could they now learn to love again and love their foster carers? And if you look, those pink bars are pretty good. Actually, that's not much different from normal kids. So there's every hope that if you're brought up in a loving and caring environment, even later on, it can make things better. I think that's a great message of hope for me in my business. So how should we help? We've got distressed people, and I'll come on to this in a bit. What is drugs? Is it cognitive behavior therapy? And what we tend to do is randomized controlled trials to see which horse comes in first. But I will come and say a bit more of that. I think I'll stop sharing now if I can. Yeah. So that's a bit about the commonness of the problems. Do you have another question for me? Sorry.
Yes, and the last question, the third question is, what is the science underlying mental health difficulties, including genetics and the brain?
Right. Well, I've indicated a bit of that there really is quite a lot of genetics and brain studies, including parents. And I think what is interesting is that every case is different. But some things are much more genetic, like autism is about 95% genetics. These kids with callous unemotional traits, they can have a lovely upbringing, but still turn out to be rather difficult. Let me give you an example of a kid who was at one of our schools. He was 15. He said to his mate, oh, these are kids he's been with actually since primary school. Most of them went up. The others are off playing football. Let's go nick their mobile phones from the lockers. All right. They're not lockers in this particular school. So they go and get 14 mobile phones. And then he said, oh, look out, teacher's coming. Throw them in the bush. So his friend threw them in the bush. Actually, the teacher wasn't coming. But my patient then took all 14 and took them down to Camberwell cash converters, who were a bit suspicious. He knew what he was doing, a bit silly to do that because he's likely to get caught, but he didn't care. He understood people would be upset, but he just didn't care. So that's one of those more genetically determined psychopathic lovely parents. So we're always doing that balance about how much is due to what happened to somebody and how much is due to what could be going on in their lives. Things like bullying, things like being demeaned by people, being abused, We divide abuse into physical abuse, if you've been smacked about by your parents, emotionally abused, continuously demeaned. And you can do that. We do have a thing called expressed emotion. We'll interview some parents for about 30 minutes and count how many times they say nasty things about their kids. I can think of one father when he'd been saying how dreadful their child was and said, "What's he good at?" And he said, "Winding me up." Couldn't say anything nice. That's not a good factor. So distinguishing those environmental factors versus the genetic ones is quite important. And as I hope I've shown, there's quite a lot of science now behind this. So thank you for that question, Zoe.
Yeah, I've got another question for you. So you talked about problems with what's going on, but from your perspective, what actually works to get people better, and is counselling enough?
That's a good question, and I would urge all of you, if you ever get offered anything, you've got friends or parents who are offered anything, go and find out. Look at the internet. I know there's some dodgy stuff there on the internet, but have a look, because it is really important. And I think also you should be confident in finding out for yourself and not accept any expert like me saying stuff. Challenge all the time. I actually like that. And I've got a colleague called Robert Goodman who invented an instrument called the Strength and Difficulties Questionnaire. He gave his inaugural lecture, very serious person. He dyed one side of his hair red and the other blue, saying, please be skeptical. Please be skeptical. Don't accept what the expert says. So I think for anxiety and OCD, cognitive behavior therapy is the best. For depression, a range of talking cures can help. There isn't any one thing. And for the disruptive behavior disorders, parenting is really done. I've done several trials showing that if you're involved with your kids and you set limits, you can completely change it around. However, once you get into adolescence and you're outside the view of your parents and hanging out with a gang and so on, harder to change it. Medication can help. So I'm that old that when I was in the 70s and 80s, I had my hair down to my shoulder, peace and love. And I didn't believe drugs would be anything other than evil. But I've now changed my mind, partly doing brain scanning studies showing how they can make people normal inside their brains to make them stronger while they sort themselves out, and then you can take the medication away. So things called like so-called Prozac, SSRIs for anxiety and depression can help. And for ADHD, Ritalin can be enormously helpful once you're getting to a more severe area. So it can make a big difference. Sometimes you need a combination of both. Let me tell you about a girl I'm seeing at the minute who's 18. Bright girl, did very well in her GCSEs, but then started getting very depressed and low, feeling all rubbish about herself, getting withdrawn and tearful, not really seeing her friends. She got some CBT, which helped a bit, but actually there's quite a lot of stuff going at home. She came from quite a traditionally religious background, was expected to be at home on Friday nights and Saturday. Heavy number from her mother. I regret it. My mother's dead and I wasn't good enough to her, and look at me, I feel guilty. You're going to feel the same if you don't do exactly what I want and stay at home all the time and really become a good daughter. I really don't want you to be a bad daughter. Very heavy number being laid on this girl. Really, what have I done wrong that you seem to like spending your time out on Saturday night, which wasn't against the religious thing, by the way, texting her at 10 o'clock, 10:30, 11, when are you coming home, what are you doing? This is a girl of 18. Heavy number, heavy guilt trip, and this girl now really feels this heavy number. So we're doing some work with the parents to try and enlighten the parents that actually it's normal to do that in adolescence. You do need to make your own way and go out and come in late sometimes. She doesn't come in roaring drunk or smelling of dope. But she still didn't get better and was low. So we have started her on medication and she's now feeling much better and being able in a nice way to be assertive but not aggressive with her family, to say this is a normal adolescence. So a range of things can work. Counselling can be enormously happy to get at the root of the problem, but sometimes it needs other things too. Thank you for that, Zane.
Cool. That was really interesting. Yeah. So for, like, let's say there was an adolescent who is experiencing quite difficult things, and maybe typically difficult things. If they were to ask you if they were troubled, or if they weren't normal, what would your response be?
Well, I think in a way it relates to the first thing. If it's going on for some time and it's not getting better, and you've done your usual things that make you feel better, then if it's getting severe and it's carrying on and you're really, really upset and it's making you feel distressed, then I think it is getting in the way of your everyday life and happiness. So that's what I would say. I'd say, gosh, then that might be the time to seek help. Now, your school might start off with a counsellor, or if it's more serious, you might need an assessment, maybe a charity. There's a charity called Place to Be, which Joe mentioned in some schools, or a referral to CAMS, which is Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services. The difficulty is that the amount spent on mental health by several governments is pitiful. There are 12 million people between 0 and 18 in England and Wales, and for outpatient services, about 500 million. So that's £50 per child per year for all of mental health outpatient services. Saying there are 12 million subscribers to Sky Sports and BT Sports also. They spend on average, starting off £60, the average spend is £60 per month. So it's just interesting that we spend 12 times as much on football and watching sport than we do on the whole of children's mental health. Complain about it to your MP, please. This is a bit short-sighted, even on the financial front, because the WHO has determined that actually mental health, things like depression, which go on, are one of the most expensive terms in the burden. I myself have shown that those kids with the disruptive behaviours, by the time they're in their mid-20s, cost $250,000 in extra services. This might be school meetings about social exclusion or that sort of thing, teaching assistants in class because they're going off on one all the time. So all of those things can cost a lot of money. So actually investing early in interventions to help these things, to head them off at the ranch, is a very head them off early is really a good investment. But I would like to say also to you, I don't think you just do things to save money. If someone's dying of cancer and going to die anyway, they're not going to save money and go back to work. You still give them good treatment, don't you? I would say we need to get much more spent on mental health and start it getting more equivalent to as physical health, and because there's more coming. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds really good. Quite scary in a way. In a more general tone, how can someone essentially just make themselves happier and stronger in the mental health sense?
Yeah. So this is our last question before we open it up to the floor. A number of ways. One is cultivate your relationships. Don't hide in a hole if you can. Go out and see your friends. I'm sure you all found during lockdown that made everybody feel a bit tenser and worse. Keep up your friendships. Be emotionally generous with your friends and on yourself. Don't beat yourself up. So that's number one. Number two is keep up your skills, whatever it may be. If you're good at football or a musical instrument, whatever it might be, any extra things that you're good at, that shows you, that can make you more resilient when bad things happen and able to cope more. It might be anything. It might be drawing or art or playing music or singing, just something outside the main school stuff that you're good at. Thirdly, look after your body. There's an old Latin saying, let me get this right, mens sana in corpore sano, a healthy mind lives in a healthy body. Do a bit of exercise, do a bit of jogging, do a bit of stretching, look after yourself. You will feel better, and it's been shown to make you feel better. And lastly, I would say, if it's something in your bag, do a few mental exercises to stay calm, stop yourself going off on one, stop and think, be calm, be glad for what's good, look around you, a bit of mindfulness, a bit of yoga. That can help a lot of people stay better during difficult times. And I think all these things can help. By the way, finally, I would say, if you're interested in this field and career, we do need more diversity in psychology and psychiatry. I'd encourage people to apply them when, certainly in King's, which is where I work, where selecting people for psychology and psychiatry training, we positively encourage that. And I find it a really interesting career. I was a paediatrician for 5 years, sticking needles into premature babies and ventilating them. I found it a bit boring. This is always an interesting intellectual subject area to go into. You never quite know what's coming through the door each day. Never repetitious. So thank you for that question, Zane.
Thanks a lot. I think we're going to move on to a Q&A now. And Amjad and Angel are going to read out the questions.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so one of our viewers have asked, what would a teenager's body look like in general if they have a lower mental health?
I don't think there's one answer to that. They might look great in their body, or they might look more collapsed and withdrawn, a bit paler. I'm going to say something completely unprofessional, less bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, but I think you'd all know, and I think you should have your own confidence in judging if one of your friends doesn't look right. That'd be quite important. And they might have changed their habit. They might have been doing more stuff and going out more, maybe doing more sports if that's their thing, or hobbies. And if they start getting a bit more withdrawn, that would be something to look out for. Or some people eat less when they're unhappy. Some people comfort eat and eat more. But it's the change, I guess, you're looking for.
Hi, sir. A viewer has asked, after a year of lockdown and online learning, how do you motivate boys, young adults, to move out of their passive attitudes and drive themselves forwards towards a goal?
I'm not sure I'm qualified to say that. I think you might be better to say, Amjad and people like that. What is it that gets you up and going? Because there's a world out there, I suppose, and I think, well, you know, you're not going to starve to death, but being on the dole isn't much of a laugh, and getting good qualifications is opens up a better opportunity to have a nicer life. So everybody being aware of that, and one hopes, Katie will answer this, that the schools and things are interesting and they make it pleased to be welcome back. And hopefully that's, for me, the magnet is getting out there into the real world and not being on a screen, because the screen is awful. I have a son who's 24 who's been working on screen. He's got a bit low during this time. He's got quite depressed because just adding up numbers. He's an impact officer for an educational charity. It's been rather horrible. And actually getting up and getting out, I would encourage people to go to as many face-to-face things rather than online things if they possibly can. And I think that will light their fire.
Okay, another question is, what would be the first steps in acknowledging that you have anxiety or OCD?
Oh, that's interesting. Talk to your friends, because they're all going to be frightened of some things. You should be a bit frightened. You should be a bit frightened of being run over, despite the new traffic schemes in Dulwich or wherever you live. So anxiety is a good thing. Perception of threat is good. But if you're getting much more frightened than your friends about things, and of course, all these things are dimensional. They're not yes or no, but how really worried are you? Driven by fear of exams and failure to stay up all night. You're spending 3 hours on your homework a night instead of 1 hour or 1.5. That's important. And then some people will go into denial. They say, well, of course I've got to wash my hands for half an hour, especially during COVID, before I get up, and they start getting red hands and that sort of thing. That's normal. I can feel that. you might need to start listening to your friends and parents. What do they say is normal or not normal? Or, oh, hang on, I've got to just go and check the windows twice before I go out. There's another OCD things. Or I'm absolutely disgusted by dirt, as we mentioned. Cleaning and OCD. And in anxiety, you might think it's normal to do certain things against anxiety and fearfulness and fearful about going out at night and being mugged. It's about checking it out with other people, I think. So the first thing to do is to check it out with other people and then say, yeah, do you know what? I'm much more anxious than other people and I'm finding this uncomfortable. Because the difference between someone with just autism who thinks I should have it just this way is that they know it's right. With OCD and things, you feel, I know at one level this isn't quite right. So actually, you might find people are defenses, but you couldn't say to them, well, do you really think it is right? Or is there a little bit of you think, meh, this isn't very comfortable?
So another question is, how can we use PSHE or Wellbeing to develop young people's understanding of mental health issues?
Well, I'm not a teacher, Jed, so I don't know what is in the curriculum at the minute. It is now, I think, Katie will probably tell us this, it's now being mandated that there is something on on mental health in that. I've met, there's a lady called Amanda Spielman, who's the Ofsted inspector. I said, please, could you inspect schools for their mental healthiness and also what they teach on that? I think they'll do the way it's taught, but you know, how do you stop it just being a box ticking exercise? But if you talk to parents, yes, they like the rankings about this is a good school, get my kid to do well things, but they mostly say, actually, I quite like, and they'll go around, won't they, on parents' days, is this a happy school? So I think it should be measured if we want schools to be happier, but also in the teaching of it, I'm always, if I'm ever asked in that, so I'm amazed how interested people are about what's the impact of bullying, what is anorexia, that sort of thing, how can I look after myself, the kind of things we're talking about today. So I don't know if this is normal or radical in the schools you're at, but how about co-designing the curriculum and asking the teachers, can we have a little say in this, please, miss? Because I think that would be good, because then you'll have more ownership for it. And tell me, any of you, Amjad, Zoe, Zane, Angel, how often are you asked to give rankings on your teaching? Do you give them? Boring, all right, pretty good. Whoa, that was really good. And how often do the teachers get asked to review that?
Well, recently, most teachers have started asking us how we feel about the teaching and how, like, what they could do to make it better for us to understand. But before I started in year 10, no teachers would ask you those questions at all.
Which is a bit funny, because there's more to life than GCSE grades, isn't there? Not much, but so actually knowing that, and certainly I have to, if I give a lecture, I find it scary. I don't know if I'm going to be rated tonight, perhaps I am, but you do get rated, and then you can change it, because you can look and say, well, you know, that was a bit too much, that was a bit too little. And in mental health work now, we've changed. It used to be you give people therapy for 6 months instead of hope they got better and managed to deny it if they got worse to yourself. Now we always do measures before, middle and end of treatment. And some people do session by session treatment. I remember one dad, I was doing this and I, like today, was talking quite a lot, and he said, too much sizzle, not enough steak. But next time I really made him work and do lots of exercises, and I got much better ratings. So I think, yeah, in a polite and respectful, but nonetheless assertive way, get your own voices heard in the PHSE curriculum is what I would say, Andrew.
Okay, another viewer has asked a question saying, if there's one particular factor which has caused the dramatic increase in mental health issues since you were a student, what would you suggest? Obviously, there's much greater awareness too.
Well, this is debated in the literature whether there really has been an increase. There probably has been a slight increase in anxiety and depression. These are things that are reported by people themselves. I think the awareness thing that you said, Angela, is absolutely, people just thought, oh, well, that's tough, life is a horrible thing, and then you die, and just accept it. So I think people are becoming more aware of it. But I think the recognition, it was always there. I think nasty things happened in some schools, including bullying. Some kids were very miserable. Some kids were difficult, and they were just labelled as wimps or snowflakes or just troublemakers, rather than anybody trying to understand if they were hurting inside. So I'm not sure if the rate has gone up. So let's take the example of autism. When I first studied, that was considered to be like about 4 in 10,000 kids have it. Now we know it's 1%, but that's because we're much better at recognizing it. In the old days, you only were considered to be autistic if you were very low IQ and chewing the radiator, really, and not looking all over the place, never any kind of eye contact. Now we realize that there's a milder version. So I've got a colleague called Simon Baron-Cohen at Cambridge who's done an autism researcher on maths professors at Cambridge, and 50% of them meet the criteria. And so I think there's much better recognition that these aren't just great British eccentrics, but they can have autism, for which we can then start making adjustments and managing things better. Oh, you said, oh, sorry, I haven't answered your question. Is there one factor? Well, first of all, I'm saying recognition is the one factor. Well, I think in general well-being, I think having the studies, the evidence suggests that communities where there's a good sense of community, and this is true in Lambeth and Southwark, actually, Guy's and St Thomas's Trust have done a big study on that, where people feel connected to their community because they say hello, people look after each other. You have better levels of well-being and less depression and anxiety than where we're all just individuals, stuff you, I'm going to make lots of money and ride roughshod over other people. So having a caring community and culture, which can start in a good school, by the way, but also outside, that makes for better mental health and well-being.
So sticking on the subject of autism, do conditions like that, or even Asperger's syndrome, do conditions like these actually make someone more liable to develop even more symptoms like depression? So would you say that Asperger's or autism, conditions like that, do they actually fuel the development of more conditions like depression?
So Asperger's and autism have two things. One is challenging behavior, because they're much more likely to go off on one if things. I've got one kid who, like, if the fork is laid on the table 2 inches to the left, will have a tantrum, just because they need this desperate drive for sameness, and they get more worried about things and they will explode more. So they're two sides of the same coin. They're more worried by a lack of routine. I was in a cab this afternoon, LBC had, or whoever it was, Nick Ferrari, having people phone in about the fuel crisis. And one guy said, I'm a bus driver for kids with autism. If I'm 2 or 3 minutes late, they will be so upset and so distressed. So I need petrol for that. And that is absolutely typical for the more severe forms of autism or Asperger's. But those are the two things that are particularly common: anxiety and challenging behavior as other people perceive it.
Okay, how would you recommend that schools would be able to try to help students manage their mental health in a healthy way? And what could they do that would strongly benefit their mental health?
Firstly, by having a whole school approach to mental health, not just having a mental health officer, which will be one teacher's probably also the head of geography or something doing that. Getting an atmosphere that is caring. So we just recently did a trial in 60 secondary schools in London, bringing in mental health and anti-bullying, and showed that people felt a bit better. Helping students not feel alone, which goes back to my previous point, feeling a sense of connectedness. So pupils who feel that their teachers care for them and that they're living in a caring school have lower levels of mental health problems. So That's the second thing, to make it a caring school. Thirdly, making it okay to talk about these things is very important. So as Joe Spencer, I'm part of a charity called The Place to Be. Yes, it's got counselling if you've got difficulties, but it's also got the place to talk. We can just go in for 15 minutes to try and sort something out about whether it's good. Talking about these things, also acknowledging that not everything is a mental health problem. I mean, this is the balance. Be sensible. Another kid in a Southwark school said to me, "Oh, in my school, it's the mental health Olympics. Let's see who's got the biggest problem." And you can do it, you know, and you can get contagion like that. Can say, "Oh, look at me, I've cut my thighs deeper than you have." That's not healthy, is it? So getting that kind of balanced approach in a caring school that enables you to talk about it, but promotes kindness. And I've got a 3-letter word I quite like: fun. You can have some fun at school. That balances things out and makes people feel stronger and more resilient, so that when the bad things come, they can talk about it and sort it out. Having a strong anti-bullying policy that actually works in practice, and listening to kids is important. Getting in early so that people feel they can say, "I'm being bullied," and we're now going to get the perpetrator, sit them down in the group, let the young person who's being bullied say to the bullies how it makes them feel, and make the other people. In bullying, there's often one perpetrator, but then there'll be 2 or 3 bystanders who know it's going on, don't do anything. Getting the bystanders to say to the bully, "That's not on, mate. You're not going to do that." I actually want to say, mate, is equally prevalent in girls. Often a bit more relational bullying, about saying, "You're horrible, you're a cow, you're not my friend anymore."
Sounds good, sir. Thanks a lot. I think we're just finishing up now.
Yeah, it's 6 o'clock, I think.
Yeah.
Nearly.
But yeah, thanks a lot. It was really, really interesting. And thanks for taking some time out of your day.
Thank you. It's amazing that you're attending. My goodness, 44 chats. So thank you all for attending. And yeah, really great pleasure to talk to you about this, and some really thoughtful questions there.